All right. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin real quick for some introductory statements.
All right. Hello and welcome to today's panel. I'm Caitlin Crowder.
I'm Eric Chu.
And we are members of the Student Civic Engagement Council, also known as SCEC. SCEC is a group of 8 civically engaged undergraduate students that connect with the broader Pittsburgh community while working alongside the Office of Pitt Serves. We arrange service projects with local nonprofits and provide opportunities for other Pitt students to explore Pittsburgh through service. We are hosting this panel to share the experiences of various Pittsburgh leaders in civic engagement. We hope to provide valuable information about the different civic pathways and the ways that you can engage with them throughout your careers. If you have any questions for our panelists as we go along, please feel free to put them in the chat. So let's introduce our panelists.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to go through each of our panelists. And by the way, thank you panelists for joining us today, taking the time out of your Friday. I know you guys are all very busy, so we're greatly appreciative of it. So we're going to read off a little bio, followed by a question for each panel. Arthur Pang. Arthur Pang is the Marketing and Communications Manager at the Federal Home Loan Bank of Pittsburgh and a Human Relations Commissioner for Allegheny County. He has spent the entirety of his career in public policy. In his previous private sector work, Arthur led government affairs, PAC management, and economic risk analysis at PPG in Pittsburgh and at Citigroup and HSBC Bank in New York City. In his previous public sector work, Arthur worked with the Bush administration in the Commerce Department and the Obama administration in Secretary Clinton's State Department, both roles related to economic and public diplomacy with work in Washington, D.C. and Beijing. Arthur is also an active member of the Western Pennsylvania community, and in addition to being a county commissioner, also serves on several nonprofit boards in the region. So Arthur, your personal background includes both public and private sector work in economics and public policy. Can you talk about your career path and what others can learn from that?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Eric. Just wanted to say thank you to you and Caitlin for all the arrangements, as well as Shanae and the entire UPIT group for hosting this session. In terms of unique pathways and otherwise, I would just say, taking the opportunities where you can and knowing what your level of engagement is, as well as where your interests are. So, I was going to school for undergrad in Washington, D.C. at American University. The president at the time was George W. Bush. I knew that I had an interest in getting involved with public service. And my background was primarily around the business side. So doing trade policy and doing international affairs was things that resonated with where I was at the time, and it led me to the career that I have now. So as you mentioned, just kind of with the Bush administration when he was in office, with the Obama administration when he came in, and then also seeing where the limitations for your own career are as well. So just constantly asking questions of yourself of, are you still happy where you are? And then also, if not, what things can you be doing to take on new and interesting opportunities?
Great, thank you. Now we'll move on to Elise Williams. Elise Williams has always been an advocate in her community and workplace. She took her advocacy to her local school district by running for a school board seat and winning. During her time on that board, she advocated for students' curriculum, community outreach, and to disrupt the school to prison pipeline. She is currently still very active in her community by recently organizing a school supplies drive. So our question for Elise would be, how did you decide to run for a school board seat in your district?
Thank you everyone for having me today. So really it came about, I would say back in high school, I started to begin to see the value of our local government officials. And I remember saying to my best friend at the time that one day I will be mayor, and I'm still on that track. But when I left the States for a while, I moved to China for 3 years and I returned home and I bought a house. And when you start paying taxes, I believe you should know where your money is going. So I started to attend local school board and local city meetings. And when I attended the school board meetings, I just was not satisfied with how things were being run at the time. Some things were not being done by the books, that we will call it that. And I just knew that I had the background and the passion for my community to do better. And so I ran with very limited resources. So I'm here to tell you that grassroots does work. And I was able to win my seat handedly. So.
Awesome. All right, and we'll move on to Elise Pinchback Johnson. Elise Pinchback Johnson, a native of Pittsburgh, is the founder and CEO of Pinchback Consulting. Her volunteerism and civic engagement experience spans over a decade, including leadership and service for numerous organizations, mentorship of several young people, and philanthropy. Her volunteerism has earned her several awards and honors, and Elise received her bachelor's degree from Pitt in psychology and Japanese, and a Master of Public Management degree from Hines College at CMU. She is also a proud wife and mother. So Elise, how have your civic engagement and volunteerism experiences contributed to your professional advancement?
So thank you, everyone, for organizing this wonderful panel today. I'm happy to be here. And so as I think about, especially now being an organizational consultant and having my own business, it's really been my involvement in the community that has allowed my business to be successful. And so by serving on boards and volunteering for organizations, raising money for organizations, I was able to demonstrate my ability and the work that I'm able to do. And so as a result of that, when it came time to kind of branch out on my own and say, hey, I'm looking for clients, I'm looking to come work for organizations, they were able to point back to that work and say, wow, she has that experience. When I think about work that I've done with strategic planning by sitting on a board or by raising money for an organization, people trusted me to then take that that learning and that knowledge that I had and be able to apply that to their organization and to actually pay me for it. Even before I branched out on my own, the work that I had done in the community as a volunteer also was helpful in being able to negotiate at my job and say, in addition to the skills that I received in school, the skills that I picked up in my other jobs, I also have this plethora of experience in the civic engagement and nonprofit field through my volunteerism. And so it's been great to be able to connect those things and really use that to advance my career, my brand, and my company.
Great, thank you. And lastly, we will talk about Lilly Lumetti. Lilly is a recent graduate and is currently doing a year of service with Pulse. He graduated with a BPhil in International and Asian Studies and a psychology with minors in Korean, psychology, and neuroscience. Lilly was a member of SCEC for 2 years and says it's a pleasure to be in this space again so soon after graduating. He aspires to be a medical doctor and spent much of his undergraduate career focusing on developing interpersonal skills to be more empathetic and understand people on a deeper level. So our question for Lilly is, how did you find your civic engagement tying in with your Asian cultural studies and interests?
So for me, the civic engagement aspects of it were very crucial in regards to it. The entire reason why I started studying Asian culture in general is because in the United States, we're an individualist society, but we're very diverse in terms of like our Asian populations and other ethnic groups. We're a very diverse group. But in terms of our everyday society, we're individualists. We focus more, a lot of our values are an individualist society. So for those who don't know what an individualist society is, it's basically, we focus more on who we are as individuals, like rather than how we fit into the group. We're focused on more on our individual goals and our individual development. And that can present itself in terms of shame and guilt culture and stuff like that. But in any case, the reason why I study Asian studies is more to be able to understand kind of a different perspective, because even though I myself am Indian, I was born and raised in an individualist environment. Everyday work life was similar to that. So that ties into civic engagement in the sense that when I'm working in these communities, I'm really trying to focus on how can I understand people, how can I understand their perspectives, where they're coming from, and really relate to them, even though I might come from like a very different privilege, very different background than them. So all of it really tied together to really help me really focus on those empathy skills. And I think it's crucial, regardless of what field you're going to, even though I'm going into medicine and want to be a medical doctor, regardless of what field you want to go into, communication skills, being able to understand your peers, your colleagues are crucial regardless of what you want to do professionally. So I feel those skills are very important, and hopefully I can shed some of my insights I can share with you today. But thank you.
Of course. So it's awesome to hear a little bit about all of you. It's clear that everyone's got various different experiences in each of the pathways. So we look forward to being able to explore those today. So now we're going to move on. We've asked each panelist to prepare an artifact that's representative or important to their civic engagement journeys. So we're actually just going to go right back to Lalit and have Lalit share his artifact.
So the artifact I wanted to originally share was actually a simple kind of shirt or kind of like a jacket from a volunteering event. It was a volunteer appreciation event, but I'll talk more about this picture because it ties into that still. So I can't share it quite, so I guess I'll says the host can. So I will share it quickly on my phone, the picture. But basically, all this is a simple landscape picture of Pittsburgh, the riverside. I'll show that right here. It's a bit. Let me see where the camera is. Right here. So just a simple landscape photo. So while this in and of itself seems very unremarkable, I was able to get this picture because it was for PMAD. Was it 2 years ago? PMAD, my first year as SCEC. So I was previously I'd worked with an organization known as MAS Community of Pittsburgh, and I'd had like a good experiences like helping them out like with their fundraising and stuff like that. So at that morning, like they were also participating in PMAD, but their hours are a bit different compared to the normal PMAD hours. They were actually on a project 6 in the morning, but I'd helped connect them with PitServes, and I was kind of like helping kind of like be the in-between person. But basically that picture is kind of like a moment of like how rewarding it is. Kind of like I went there 6 in the morning just to help out, just because I had extra time. I just wanted to go and help out. And I was able to take a picture of something I wouldn't otherwise be able to see. So I will actually, I can apparently show my screen. So let me just show you that real quick. Let me see. Let me see. I think this should work. Actually, I might not be sure. Just technical. So, but in any case, that's back to the story. So that's more important. So going forward, like even though I'd helped with the MAS community of Pittsburgh, like in various fundraising events, I never saw what I was doing as specifically significant, just like something I should be doing in terms of like wanting to help them out. So like they had a volunteer appreciation event, they invited me to it. And like it really kind of like during the event, I really kind of understood kind of like, even though I myself might not see my individual actions as important, it's very important to consider that other people's perspectives, that even while in the moment you might not see your actions important, how you carry yourself in your daily interactions, just in terms of like communication, just your overall mood and personality, even if it's just a few interactions, that can really make the day of people on an individual basis. So actually that's like the takeaway of my story, the fact that 2 things. One, like just seeing that sunset, the sunrise I wouldn't have seen normally because I went to a space that I wouldn't normally go to because I want to just help out. That alone can be rewarding because it's kind of like the fruits of your efforts that you weren't expecting, something that it's kind of like the path you weren't expecting you take. You find like a lot of hidden gems in that experience. And the second part is that the way you carry yourself, that really is important how people perceive you in terms of just your everyday interactions. People, that matters to people. And it's a very important part, I feel, at least for me personally. I think interpersonal interactions, really trying to connect and empathize with people is very important. So I just found kind of like this picture kind of like ties into just like that specific organization. I can go on and on about like stories and experiences with them, but I think that gives an idea of like why I found that picture and my experiences with that organization very important. Thank you.
Certainly. I think I have an extremely similar experience with PMAD. Was my first PMAD freshman year is going to like Heinz Field and planting trees there. And it's just been like a lasting memory because every time I go there, I see it, and it's a cool experience. So thanks for sharing, Lily. All right, we'll now move on to Elise with an A. That's how I'm going to differentiate.
Okay, so Elise with an A. So I'm actually wearing my artifact. So I'll stand up so you can see it. This is my Rukmini Foundation shirt. And Rukmini Foundation is an organization that I sat on the board for about 3, maybe 4 years. I don't know. These years are running together, but I was on the board for quite a while. And I think there are 2 things that I want to share about my experience with Rukmini Foundation that I think are important to this conversation. So first, I'll tell you a little bit about it. So Rukmini Foundation is an organization that provides scholarships for girls in Nepal to attend school. And so we know that in Nepal and in a lot of countries, a lot of girls are pulled out of school and forced to get married to provide for their families. And this organization has really been instrumental in ensuring that girls can continue their education and make decisions about their lives that are going to empower themselves and the generations that come after them. And Rukmini is actually the name of the grandmother of the founder, who was married as a child bride and decided for her family that she wanted to do differently and was able to do that and to go on and raise successful generations of her family. So the 2 things I want to say about being involved in the Rukmini Foundation is being thoughtful and about how you're involved in community and civic engagement. And so I've been a part of a ton of different organizations, been on a lot of different committees, but I always, at the times that I'm involved, I want to be very much ingrained in them. And so I kind of run anything that I'm involved in kind of across 3 areas that are important to me. So education, international affairs, and service. And why these are important to me are because education, I'm the daughter of an educator. And so education has been at the forefront of my life for a long time. I went on to work for 5 years in central office at our local school district. And so have always been committed to ensuring that all children have a high quality education. International affairs was actually introduced to me when I was in middle school. So I went to an international studies middle school. And if you didn't take a language in elementary school, you had to take Japanese. And so I went on and studied Japanese all the way through middle school, high school, and into college, and had my second study abroad experience at Pitt, because I actually went to Japan as a high school student, and then went back and spent a semester as an exchange student, and then went on to work for the World Affairs Council, which is an international affairs education organization. And so the opportunity to travel abroad and to experience other cultures is something that's important to me as well. And then finally, service. I've always believed that if you are given opportunities, that it's your obligation to give back. And so as early as I can remember, just thinking about doing service with my church and doing service in other areas of my life, it's always been something that's important to me. And so why I chose to highlight Rukmini Foundation is because I saw the 3 of those things come together. And a lot of the other organizations that I've been involved with, it's really been maybe 1 or 2 of those things, but Rukmini really kind of brought it together, which is important to me. And I'll say just one more thing. The second thing is really just thinking about fundraising. And so, I'm now at a point where I'm able to be more of a philanthropist. But when I first came out of college, and thankfully I didn't have student debt. I did get a full academic scholarship, which was beautiful, but I still didn't have a lot of money. And so, before it became a thing on Facebook where you could kind of put up your organization and raise money, I was having birthday parties to raise money for Rukmini Foundation. And so I would charge everyone the amount of my age. And so I did this, I think, between the ages of like 27 and 31. And so you would pay that amount, have an opportunity to come to my birthday party, and there'd be a DJ and food and just a fun time. But I'm saying that to say that, even in the time right now, you can be a philanthropist. And I think Elise with an E, talked about the importance of just crowdfunding and grassroots fundraising, and something that you can do. So even if you can't personally write a check for a couple thousands of dollars, you can also raise that money. And that was something that I felt was very rewarding as my time as a board member with Rukmini Foundation.
Yeah, I think everything you touched on falls into one of the civic pathways that we're looking at today. And definitely your notes on philanthropy are very applicable to hopefully a lot of the attendees today. So thank you for sharing that. All right, and we'll move on to Elise with an E now.
Much like Elise with an A, which we studied Japanese at Pitt together. So we have that connection. And she is right. I receive mailers and things like that because I did attend one of her birthday parties. And I got a really sweet gift from the girls that I helped. And so that was really impactful. And like Lilly, I also studied Asian studies while I was at the University of Pittsburgh. Sorry, I forgot to mention that in my bio. I am a Pitt grad as well. And I work there now in the Office of Admissions. And so what I brought for my artifact was, I don't know if you can see it. It's a little hard because my background, but is my my sign. So my sign for when I ran for office. And the reason why I decided to bring that was because I had 5 signs. 5. If you don't know, those signs are very expensive. And that was all I could afford. And I really wanted to show that because I wanted just to show you that you don't have to have these huge, budgets and all these people behind you with a ton of money. If you are passionate and you are able to show that you are the best person for the role, and that's where that grassroots part really comes into handy, people will support you. I had, if you don't know, as a school board member, you run on your party's ticket. However, you can recruit people from the other side as well. So I had both Republicans and Democrats support me because at the core, they understood that I was there to uplift the education of the scholars in our school district, right? To me, that should be nothing to do with partisanship. We should all be in agreement that we need to uplift our scholars. And it was really my experience coming to Pitt. I come from a very small town outside of Pittsburgh. We are an old steel mill town, so economically it is a depressed area. And it wasn't really until I got to Pitt that I really understood that education is not fair. And opportunities I did not have in school, I didn't know because I wasn't exposed to them. And so that is what really started me on my pathway to being passionate about education, because even though I didn't have those opportunities, with what I did have, I was able to take advantage of that and still end up at the same place, right? And still be able to take advantage of those opportunities while I was at the university. And so in everything that I do, again, I work in admissions now, I'm really passionate about putting service first. And I believe you can do that in all aspects of your life, whether you're a nonprofit or corporate or some other entity, you can put service first. And so I approach my job every day with the same service attitude that I had when I was on the school board, that by myself doing my job very well, it is a service to help others, right? I'm serving the students that are looking to enter into the university, have the experiences and experience the education and also all the other things that come with higher ed. So that was my artifact. I wanted to show you that if you couldn't see, and it's hard to see because of my background, but it was orange. And I did that because, like I said, I had 5 signs. And most people do either our school colors, which were black and gold, or red, white, and blue. And I knew that no one would have orange and white. So of those 5 signs that I had, I knew I had to go out with a bang with a little bit of sign that I had. So you can use creativity, in your service as well to make a bigger impact. You don't have to have a huge following. You don't have to have, like I said, a large budget. The most important thing is coming with passion and creativity, and you can be surprised at what you can achieve. So that was my artifact.
Thank you. That was awesome. Yeah, I think just like I said with Elise with an A, it's so relatable for like not only me, but I hope that a lot of the attendees are also relatable to that because, of course, coming with a passion and trying to figure out ways to do things that you never thought you could do. So last but not least, we'll have Arthur share his artifact.
Sure, thanks. I didn't know if this would be interactive or not, but my artifact is this thing. And if you know what this is, you can type it into the chat. But for me, my life in civic engagement and work really, I think a lot of folks talked about how early they started in. And I really feel like my life in civic engagement probably started around 2008 when I went to China. So after I graduated from undergrad in 2007, I went with the U.S. Embassy in Beijing and the U.S. Department of Commerce, as Eric mentioned, under the Bush administration. I was fortunate enough to receive a Fulbright scholarship and was doing economic development research in Beijing. But the artifact that I brought is the Olympic mascots for the 2008 Beijing Olympics. And I think it's representative of just, a country that is in transition and a country that still has a lot of challenges as well. And so the mascots, or fuwas they were called, or the friendlies, was like trying to put its best face forward. And while I lived in China for that year doing my economic development research, I also saw in volunteering and also doing work with the embassy, I was able to visit places that weren't doing so well in China. So although Beijing is pouring a lot of money into making themselves look like the best place possible, there was also plenty of places, I was volunteering at an orphanage, I was helping with the embassy's work in bringing US companies to make investments in China in their municipal transit systems and otherwise. But there's a lot of different work that goes in, not just in here's like the bright shiny veneer of the friendlies or our best foot forward with the Olympics, but also here's some underlying issues, and they're ongoing, they're systematic, they're systemic. How do we recognize those and make those changes? And I think the first part is asking a lot of questions, and really being incisive and being interested and coming to the work in an authentic way, in a way that says, how can I support what's going on here? How can I understand what's going on here? But then how does that resonate, and what's my place in that as well? And so recognizing that, when I came back from China, I lived in a bunch of different places, and ultimately I came here to Pittsburgh. We have a lot to be proud of here in Pittsburgh, just like in my experience in China and Beijing at the time. There's a lot to be proud of here in the city, but I think there's a lot of challenges too. And I think for anybody who's living in Pittsburgh, anybody who's going to school at UPitt, you're on the front lines of making a choice about doing something really important in civic engagement. And for all the different panelists that are on this meeting today, everybody chose a different pathway, and a lot of us, we're still choosing our pathway too. So the way that you were brought up and the places that you're from are not necessarily your destiny, but having a genuine interest in the place that you are and what your role and responsibility and all that you can potentially take on within your capacity to do so. I think those are things that you should really look toward. And so my artifact is representative of a place that has a lot to be proud of, and a place that also has real struggles and real things that need people to make those changes. And so I see that in my experiences, and I see that here in this city as well. And so I've been here for 7 years, and I could have had a Pittsburgh artifact too to make the point. But I think that yeah, I'll just stop there. But I'm really excited to be on this panel with so many civic leaders.
For sure. I think it's great to hear all of those different items and stories, and because we all have our different journeys, and we all kind of fall into different pathways to a certain extent, or another to a certain extent. So it's great that we all have these different experiences and can share them. So I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin now for some questions.
Yeah, so we're just going to take like a brief pause. If there are any questions from the audience, feel free to go ahead and type them in the chat real fast, and we can get those answered. So we'll just give that like a minute, see if anybody has anything. Okay, I'll keep an eye on the chat, but if any come up, we can sort of interject there. But thank you, panelists, for sharing those items that are so special and unique to you. We all have different defining moments or experiences in civic engagement, and those artifacts really make it clear that inspiration can come from a variety of sources and experiences. So now we're going to move on to some questions that we have from the panelists, or for the panelists, excuse me. These questions will revolve around the 6 civic engagement pathways that we're focusing on. And just as a refresher, in case you guys aren't aware, these 6 pathways are community engaged learning, community organizing and activism, direct service, philanthropy, policy and government, and social entrepreneurship and corporate social responsibility. So these questions and sort of their respective answers will all relate to those pathways in some way. So I'm going to start with Elise with an A. And so my first question for you is, how did your passion in civic engagement change as you transitioned from college to your professional career?
That's a good question. I think that just as simple as going from the shelter that is school, and not that you don't learn a lot in school or you don't get to experience the real world, but there is a level of just, I think, insularity that exists on a college campus that I think is designed, because otherwise I think if you were just on your own and things were just chaotic, you probably wouldn't be as successful. And so when you get out into the quote real world, you're like, wow, there's really issues out here that need to be addressed. And you experience them on your job, you experience them in your communities. And, for me, I just really felt compelled to do something about that. And then, adding the layer, and this layer has always been apparent to me because it's something that, my family has talked about, adding the layer of being a woman, adding the layer of being Black on top of these existing issues just really compelled me to want to get involved. And so one of the first organizations that I joined when I graduated was the Urban League Young Professionals of Pittsburgh. And, that was a great experience for me for a couple reasons. And, having other young Black professionals in the region who were having some of the same experiences as me, like, hey, like, how do we change some of these things? What should we care about? What should we be concerned about? How do we make this city better for us so that, if we want to stay here or if we're from here, like I am, and then we want to get married and have kids and think about schools, what are we doing? How do we do that? And so, for me, that was really the push to want to change those things. And then I would say transitioning from my first job at the World Affairs Council, where we were really focused on bringing that international affairs education to students around the region, that really compelled me because we could see even the discrepancies between what some students were exposed to and what some weren't. And so even the same program that sent me to Japan when I was in high school, I got to run that program and send students abroad. And so really thinking about, how do you decrease those disparities? And I actually was funded by the Heinz Endowments, which is a local foundation, to focus on Black male students because they were not getting these opportunities to travel abroad. And so really trying to understand that disparity and figure out how do we engage Black male students. And then going into the school district, where really that just opened up a Pandora's box of inequality. And knowing that, there were things that I was doing on inside of the school district, trying to change those things. And then also working with organizations outside to really kind of push on those things as well. Because we know that, education, whether it be on the K-12 level or on the collegiate level, is really kind of a microcosm of bigger societal issues. And so thinking about, how do you use your influence in the inside to also leverage some of the resources on the outside. And so, for me, it really just was about like, wow, okay, the blinders are off. And even in the school district, knowing that I had a really great experience at my high school, but there are 50 some other schools in the district and around the region that the experience is not the same. And so what am I obligated to do to ensure that on my job, and then also in the work that I do as a volunteer?
Thank you. That's actually really inspiring to know that I know a lot of people can have a negative outlook on once you get into the real world, how sort of those realities can crush those passions. But it's nice to know that there are resources and opportunities that still can excite you and further that passion. So now we're going to move on to Lilly. And the question I have for you is, what areas of civic engagement were you most passionate about as a student? And has that perspective changed or grown after starting your year of service as a Pulse Fellow? And then in addition, is your current work something that you ever thought that you'd be doing?
Well, for me, probably the part of service that's most exciting for me was the dark service, being able to interact with people, have those conversations, really just to like see them as people and just have those conversations. So I guess moving into the organization, working with currently Allegheny Conference on Community Development, it's more from my role is more research focused and more like a bigger picture. It's like a different sort of perspective. So for me, it's been a very big, I guess, it's been very different in terms of like learning and like skill set. Granted, I did do research during my undergraduate career, since it was like my research was in shame and guilt culture in Asia versus like the US in terms of like white Americans and Asians. But so even though it's a change, I'm still finding many ways to still continue that kind of like direct service, like with the skills I've learned during my undergraduate career, I'm still finding many ways just in terms of my everyday interactions with people within the conference, learning their perspectives and hearing about their experiences with different issues that they're passionate about. So it's more like, in terms of like, I guess my civic engagement journey, it's just that the focus has changed slightly. I'm focusing more on trying to do stuff in terms of activism and stuff like that in my free time as well, rather than, it's just like a different perspective. But I don't think that like, I still do feel just as passionate as I was like a few months ago. Even though it's just been a few months for me, I just feel like it's just as passionate. I'm still just as passionate about doing direct service, doing civic engagement work as I was. It's just I'm learning a lot about different avenues that I hadn't explored during my undergraduate career.
That's awesome. And I know a lot of people don't like change, and adapting can be hard. So that's great that you're able to still, again, hold on to sort of that passion that seems to be kind of a theme circulating here in the discussion today. So now I'll move on to Elise with an E. And my question is, how did you first get involved in working with school districts and schools, and what attracted you most about this area of civic engagement?
Yeah, so how I first got started was, like I mentioned, I started paying taxes. And I strongly recommend, if you are a taxpayer, which we all are, that you really hold your politicians to account on where your tax money is being spent. And I was not comfortable with the experience that the students in my district were getting, much like Elise, compared to the experience that I had gotten as a student in that very same district. I felt like the quality had subsided. So I was really curious with where my money was going. And so that's what kind of led me to start exploring the district and running for the district. But as I mentioned, when I got to Pitt and I realized how education is not equal throughout the United States, that was starting me on my journey of understanding, really analyzing my own experience and how education is truly fundamental to everything that we do. As Pitt alum, we are able to do a lot of different things, right? And I like Elise, I studied abroad in Japan too for my study abroad. And now I've been to 29 countries, and I come from, a single parent home, very, very modest means, which I also learned. We were working class poor when I got to Pitt. Education will really shake up your core. And I think that's a good thing, right? So, I've been able to do all of those things based on my education that I received at the university. I've been through now 2 recessions, and I, by the grace of God, have never been unemployed. Again, going back to my education. So for me, I began to realize that education is at the core of everything that I do, and also elevating me to a new place, right? So I do better than my mother, my father, and my grandparents, which is kind of the American dream, right? And I really came back to receiving my education. So that's kind of how I got started on pursuing education. And for me, it's about giving back, and it's about, if I know information, it does me no justice and no service by keeping that information within myself. And so really spreading that information. And as a first-gen student myself, and now working in admissions, I'm very passionate about, especially working with first-gen students, because you don't know what you don't know. And as somebody who now works on this side of the desk and has been through that experience, it is my duty, I believe, to share that information for those up and coming students not to go through those struggles, and again, receive the education that they rightly deserve, right? It shouldn't matter where you come from or what your background is. We should all have equal access to quality education. And so that's really how my passion with education came about, because to me, it really all goes back to that, right? No one can ever take away from you what you know. And that's really powerful. No matter where you are, no one can take that away from you. And like Elise, as a Black woman moving throughout this country, especially in even this world, I was always grounded in the fact that I had my education and I knew what I knew, and no one could ever take that away from me. So that's really where my passion lies and where it stemmed from as far as education goes.
Thank you. Yeah, I really hope that people are, truly listening to some of the points that you've been making about education, especially now being virtual. I know many students like myself are feeling unmotivated, but we have to sort of keep that in mind, what you're saying about how education truly, like knowledge truly is power, and that hopefully we're taking this seriously and, using that to further our passions and careers and things. So lastly, but not least, Arthur, my question for you is, being a marketing and communications manager as well as a human relations commissioner must mean that you engage with a variety of people quite frequently. Considering the pathway of community engaged learning and research, how did your coursework or other opportunities as a college student prepare you to work with people in the Pittsburgh community?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think it's like I said at the top of my remarks, just taking opportunities as they come. And I think that means also being open to opportunities as well. I'm a person of faith, and I do think that God responds to us and gives us direction based on not only the opportunities that are provided to us, but as well as the opportunities that are not. And so I could think of things like, a lot of folks on this call, I was hearing people winning elected office and hearing people that have never been unemployed. I haven't done either of those things. I've certainly been unemployed in my time, but I do think that, it's important to be willing and open to taking on tough challenges, and also being willing to be uncomfortable at times as well. And so, especially if you're looking to join the government in any way, shape, or form, I think Ms. Williams certainly elucidated the importance of holding people to account. And part of that is being willing to be in the same room with them, and being willing to stand your ground, and being willing to say, this is what I think, and this is what people in this district or this area need, and this is how we move forward. And I know that Elise has also, Ms. Pinchback Johnson has also, been doing those things, throughout her entire career, let alone, this past academic school year. But we see examples of this all over the city, of people that are taking opportunities, but also recognizing where opportunities are not available to people in an equitable way, and really stepping forward and saying, this needs to change. And so, my background, where I am currently, I do think that I'm blessed in many ways. And I think it's also instructive to see that for all the people, as much as we like to say, well, I'm here because I did this a certain way, there's a broad community of people that placed me where I am. And it really is, I think with anything you're doing in civic engagement, it's people driven. It's an entire group of people, whether or not you recognize that. But a lot of people, as you ascend and as you move up, as you graduate from Pitt, are really rooting for you. You have your own group of people, whether they're your parents or people in your student body, or the academic administrators and other folks that really are interested in your success. And so being willing and open to interact with them and share with them what you're doing, what you're thinking about, can really help you ultimately to be in the position that you can take on opportunities, and also have some opportunities open to you that you might not have seen for yourself.
All right, thank you. And thank you all for answering sort of that first round of questions. I'm going to turn it over to Eric, and he's going to ask you guys one more round of questions. And just as a reminder, for our people viewing, be sure to share any thoughts or questions that you have in the chat, and we'll be sure to get to those.
Thanks, Caitlin. I also just wanted to go back and touch on what Arthur said and kind of tie it back to how we started with Lilly talking about like our individualist society, and the importance of actually kind of taking off those blinders, as Elise with an A talked about after graduating, and kind of counting on the people that that surround you, and knowing that people are there to back you, regardless of the opportunity that you're pursuing, or whatever profession, journey, pathway that you choose to pursue. So it's important to remember those people are backing you, and also count on them when you don't know what to do. So I'm going to start with my question for Lilly. Although not completed yet, how do the experiences of your year of service fall in line with your professional aspirations in medicine?
So even though like you mentioned, the year of service hasn't been completed yet. To say what has been made it so fulfilling so far is being in a space where you're with other people who are passionate about the same sorts of issues. They're passionate about community service, and that's what they want to do. So, like with my house, we get to have a lot of intentional conversations about difficult topics. So I think a part of like growth in general is you need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I feel like a lot of like important growth comes when you're having those difficult conversations that you don't really want to have. It makes you feel uncomfortable. So in regards to so those conversations, having those difficult conversations, being in a space with similarly like-minded people really helps a lot. And the thing is, also being in that space, we have the leverage of like a lot of young people focused on this issue. So kind of like whether it comes to like focusing on the election, kind of like wanting to help with the different parties in terms of what, whether it's advertising or just like being involved and getting people to vote. That's something that we are in the unique position of doing, just being in a year of service in a community of people who are similar to that. And besides that, in terms of the actual work I do, it's very like interesting being in Allegheny Conference, being able to read a lot, kind of like learn about Pittsburgh in terms of kind of like things that I'd never heard about before about the region, just like from like a different perspective. Because during my undergraduate career, I was focused more on kind of like working with individual nonprofits, more kind of like individual people, but I hadn't really thought about the region as a whole in terms of Pittsburgh as a whole. So like, for instance, one thing that I'd never known about is the fact that Pittsburgh actually has an underpopulation issue, that it's actually suffering from like people not wanting to stay in Pittsburgh, even though it has so many strengths and assets in it. So it's kind of like learning more about that has been very fascinating. So I'd say going forward, I feel that kind of like making an intentional effort to really connect with my peers and kind of like focus on doing specific actions outside of my nonprofit to kind of like ultimately help people, help nonprofits. Learning more about Pittsburgh is something I want to really focus on going forward, because during my undergraduate career, I didn't have much time like outside of kind of, let's say, the community service work I was doing and kind of like doing my own academics. I didn't have as much time to really focus on intentional long-term efforts with a specific nonprofit and stuff like that. So that's something I want to continue to like develop going forward. And I guess for students at Pitt right now, I'd say try to see how can you be more involved in the community. Granted, it's much more difficult considering the nature of COVID, but if you're passionate about things, there's a way for you to do it and learn more about Pittsburgh in general. So I'd say that's what, as young people, you should be trying to focus on. Try to see ways, how can you look beyond yourself, kind of look at the large community, look at those around you and be more involved in that sense. Because people care, like people in the community, people in Pittsburgh, they care that you're trying to put in that effort, and people will recognize that, and it'll help you going forward as well. So.
Yeah, I think kind of like what you mentioned, I think COVID has brought along, like in many ways, a very unique opportunity to like come up with new ways that we're connecting with communities, and through all of these pathways, we're able to connect with the community in different ways, and like now having to think creatively about how to do that while being safe has been a very unique but also challenging task. So thanks, Lilly. I'm going to go to Elise with an A. What drove you to obtain your public management master's, and what civic pathway do you find that falling into most? I was kind of looking at community organizing and activism, or policy and governance, but I was curious, what are your thoughts on that?
So interesting. I actually had conditional acceptance to the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs right after I graduated from Pitt in 2009. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. I was a psychology and Japanese double major. And, I was just like, I'm not ready to kind of go back into school, because I don't know if I want to continue with Asian studies or if I want to go the psychology route, because when you have an undergraduate degree in psychology, if you're going to focus in that area, that you have some limited options and usually need to continue to pursue education if you really want to be in the field. And so that's what really pushed me into the workforce. And so what really pushed me into graduate school was my position was closed at Pittsburgh Public Schools. And so they restructured my department and I was laid off. And it was at that time that I was really thinking about, well, what do I want to do? And so I started getting calls, and I kind of talked about this earlier, just, from folks who knew I had the skill set around professional development, because that's what I had done in the district, and knew I had all this other experience with leadership in the nonprofit and education sector from some of my volunteerism and civic engagement work. And so I decided to go to CMU and get the master's in public management, really to substantiate and validate some of that work. Having the experience is important. And I think, the thing about the program at CMU, it's a part-time program. It's for professionals that have spent time in industry. And so they're looking for people who do have work experience, but also just knowing that going out on my own, I thought it was important to also have that second degree, that graduate degree, to go along with the experience that I had. That getting that degree and having that experience really did help me to think more about organizational management and leadership, but it also really, I think, deepened my focus on inequity. And I don't necessarily know if that was the true intention, because then I started focusing on the inequity at the university. But nonetheless, I think that's what happens even when you go into institutions where you are having those conversations and doing that work. It really is opening your eyes to some of those things. And so, when I graduated, I'm like, okay, well, now it's just time to really continue to hit the ground running. But it also pushed me to be more selective about how I'm spending my time, as a professional in my company, but also how I'm spending my time with civic engagement and volunteerism and philanthropy. All of those things are noble and wonderful, but frankly, in this region, I think that we still struggle to have some very difficult conversations about the role of racism and about the role of poverty. And so, when you volunteer for some of these organizations, or you sit on the boards of some of these organizations, you realize very quickly that they're not ready to really push forward in progressive ways, but they really just want to maintain the status quo. And so I think I was able to say, well, based on my experience, based on now, having, this additional graduate degree and these letters behind my name, I can make some true decisions about myself. I have something to validate and substantiate it. And, I can make some decisions about myself that I probably wouldn't have been able to do had I not had that experience. And I was talking before we started the chat about, do I need to take that a step further and perhaps, pursue a doctorate to even further do that. And I know that comes in the face of like, do we need to continue to get degrees? Is the college bubble going to burst one day? But I guess in the meantime and in between time, as we still live in a society that values those things, and especially to at least with the E's point about being Black women, we are really required to be overqualified for literally any job that we have, including working for ourselves, to be successful. And so, that's kind of just the name of the game right now. And until we dismantle that system, it really does require us to continue to push in that way.
Thank you. Yeah, I think kind of going back to stuff that you said, like perspective can change so much just depending on where you are and what you're doing at that exact time, which kind of also leads directly into my question for Arthur, which is, how has your perspective on civic engagement changed as you move from position to position? Do you find certain aspects of civic engagement being more or less urgent areas of work?
Yeah, my transition from federal to more state and even local government, I think, is one transition I could speak to. I think another one is also public sector to more of like private sector or government sponsored enterprise. So I think there's always areas that you can help folks in and be involved civically. I think it depends on the opportunities that are available to you at the time, and also what you're willing to take on. I mean, everybody has different life goals and has different things that are going on that are outside of their professional work. I mean, ideally, the work that you do supports the life that you actually want to live, and not the other way around. And so in that sense, picking a job and picking the kind of activities that you want to be involved with should really be things that speak to your core beliefs. And also, as you take on new positions and continue to transition into different things. Hopefully you're learning along the way too. And so I would say that I've learned a lot from when I first started. I was thinking federal government work is the be all and end all of everything. And I want to do international affairs work. And I know Ms. Pinchback Johnson also talked about being international. And and now she does great, important work here at a local level. And I feel like for all of just these two stories and the stories that you heard today, there's constant learning that's going on. And so I would just say be open to just the continual learning process and recognizing that you don't know everything, but also not letting that be an impediment to seeking out and asking for change and being part of those conversations that need your voice in those, whether you see yourself as a young person or whether you see yourself as somebody who's from this region or not from this region. We all bring different backgrounds to the table. And I would also just echo that racism is very, very real as well. And so I'm glad to hear the points on equity and the points on just recognizing what our background is and also recognizing that as an advantage as well. And so I'm not sure that that's something that initially I felt like when I was coming out of undergrad, but I think the undergrads these days are much, much smarter than I was, have much more perspective than I had during that time, but continue to build on your own experiences and be open to also recognizing when you're wrong and recognizing when you need more help and need more education in those spaces.
Thanks. Yeah, I think kind of all, no matter what stage in life, trying to find our place and like where we fit in, particular to that stage of your life, and that's always changing and developing. So last but not least, Elise, do you see yourself engaging in direct service as much now that you've transitioned to the position on the school board? And has this position changed your perspective at all on civic engagement?
Yeah, so I think what can be considered as direct service, I think sometimes I would just encourage you students not to let that paralyze you. So something as far as direct service goes is, like I said, I organize a school drive for supplies, right? I organized my community. I reached out using my social network and I said, hey guys, look, over 75% of our students are labeled as economically disadvantaged during a pandemic, right? So school supplies are going to be a need. If you have something to give, please give. And my community stepped up and did. But also I've gone door to door with a stack of voter registration cards. And I personally said, I will pay for the stamps if you just fill out this paperwork to register to vote. I don't care who you vote for. So it doesn't have to be some grandiose event or organization. You can pick up a stack of voter registration cards yourself and go out door knocking and just say, hey, I want to make sure that you're registered to vote. But as far as leading me into what I do now, I consider what I do here at the university as direct service. I am actually an international counselor, academic recruitment counselor. And so I work with students every day that are coming from all kinds of different backgrounds and situations that are all trying to achieve the same goal of receiving a quality education. And so leveraging my community, leveraging my contacts and leveraging my knowledge to help them achieve that, to me, is a form of direct service. So I would just really challenge you students, and I think you can hear from all of our experience that service comes in many forms, right? And you don't have to necessarily focus on one form, and that's the only way that you can make impact. As a school board member, policy. I know that Caitlin had mentioned policy as being one of the areas that you guys have talked about, and policy is everything. I think we can see that, especially now in our federal government, how important policy really is, right? And if you are able to impact policy, that's a huge change that you can make. So you may not think, oh, I'm just writing, these words down on this paper, but we have to follow rules, and those rules are really important. There are so many ways for you to be involved, and I would just challenge you to not to overthink it. To Elise's point, to many others' point, my community, I think you can't underestimate your community as well. My community, while I was at Pitt, forced me into service, whether I knew it at the time or not. We had some experiences on campus at different establishments around Oakland, and it forced us to do boycotts and protests and things like that as students, and we were able to make headway in as far as tackling racism and things like that. So it doesn't have to be a huge event. You can just organize either by yourself through advocacy or with a few friends and make a lot of impact. So I would just challenge you to that. And like Arthur said, we do want you all to be successful. And I just want to put it out there. As somebody in the university, you have my name is here on the screen. You can always find me. Feel free to send me an email. I am here to support you and to advocate for you in any way that I can. And that is also a form of service. So
I think that was just like the perfect way to wrap up everything that was said today. Because I think when a lot of people think about service, they think about that hands-on type of stuff. But like you said, just every different form of service coming in, all these civic pathways that we're focusing on this week are all valid and very important ways that we're engaging with communities and individuals. So I thank you for that statement. That was awesome. So I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin now.
Yeah, so at this time, I just want to ask any of the attendees, people watching, listening, if they have any questions, to please put them in the chat. And we will answer those. And then after that, we'll do closing remarks, sort of wrap up, give a thank you. A lot of great information was shared today, and we really appreciate all of the panelists being here and being open and honest with their experiences. So one question is, obviously there's a lot of passion in this, sort of meeting. We're all civically engaged and very passionate about it, but the realities of the world can sometimes sort of stunt that passion. And there are highs and lows of being, involved in everything that's happening in our world. And I just want to ask maybe one or two of the panelists, if you could give like a quick answer. What do you do when you're feeling sort of unmotivated in your civic engagement journeys?
I can go. So I will tell you, being in government, and I'm sure Arthur can agree with this, you do question yourself quite often. The passion is there, but sometimes it does wane because it can be very stressful dealing in government. And for me, what has always been important in everything that I do is to go back to the mission, right? And so for me, the mission at the time when I was on school board was to help elevate the education of my scholars in my school district. That was it. If we were not doing things that were achieving that goal, that was my duty in those meetings and in that community to bring it back to that, right? If you want to bring in, a new security system, how is that elevating the education of our young scholars in the district? If you want to make this decision about dress code or whatever the case may be, let's bring it back to this core mission. And I think that's really a way to help keep yourself very grounded when it can feel overwhelming and feel very daunting, especially when you're dealing with people with different personalities, different backgrounds and experiences and things like that. Have a mission that you have all agreed upon and bring it back to that mission. If what you're talking about is not moving forward that mission, then you need to redirect that conversation back. So that is one suggestion that I would have when you're in those weeds, and you will find yourself in those weeds, is to go back to the mission at hand and redirect yourself back to that mission.
I would just add, sometimes you have to up the ante. So some work that I'm doing right now, I'm working with a group called Black Women for a Better Education. And we organized to have the superintendent's contract not renewed of Pittsburgh Public Schools because he's not effective. And so there was a group of 55 of us who wrote a letter to our school board, had, all of us sign. And then there was a group of teachers who started a petition, and like 2,500 people signed, and people testified at the public hearing and had a whole bunch of stories about why the superintendent shouldn't be renewed. And the board decided not only to renew him, but to double down on their support with no, substantial data about why the superintendent's contract should be renewed. So of course, that was a very deflating experience for us, for all the organizing that we had done. And it really felt that in the way that they went about renewing the contract, that it was really making just a mockery and really, flexing their muscles as elected officials in the face of us who were organizing. And so we're like, okay, well, what do you do next? Well, if the people on the board don't represent you in the way you want to be represented, then you have to change that. So what are we doing right now? We are training up and getting ready to run a slate of school board members to replace those folks. And so, you have to just be persistent. If you are on the right side of history, you will prevail. I think we see that every day in the eyes of all the activists and the civil rights leaders that have been at this for decades. They don't get up, they brush themselves off, they take care of themselves, they heal themselves, sometimes physically, because they have been physically abused in this work, and then they keep at it. And so, that really for us is the takeaway, like, keep at it and continue to up the ante. Like, we caught ourselves going through the democratic process and saying, hey, please listen to us. They didn't. So it's like, well, if you don't want to listen, then, we have to take matters into our own hands. And so you just have to continue just to push and fight, because the work is not ever going to be done. But, there is a piece of it that you can impact.
Yeah, I would add to that, just in addition to go back to the mission, which is great, up the ante, I would say thirdly, go to the people. Also, your work should be recognized by the people in that community. And if it's not recognized, then maybe you're doing something wrong as well. But I guarantee you, from just knowing the things that have been going on with the Pittsburgh Public Schools, for instance, that I've seen Elise's work all over the place. And people, this work resonates with families, it resonates with people who live in these districts and people who want to see better student outcomes as well. And so, in terms of feeling deflated or feeling uninspired from day to day, it happens to all of us. We have to take time to situate ourselves mentally and also be prepared for what's out there, and also be willing to take a step back, take a break as well. And I feel like, Shanae Jeffrey actually is somebody whom I call a friend, and it's conversations that her and I have had a lot, as just hearing again and again the importance of taking time to take my foot off the gas, because I'm one of those people that will just stress work. Like, there's stuff to be done, so you just keep working, and all deadlines are you're just rushing from one deadline to the next. But ensuring that the work that you're doing is reflective of the people around you and also is making a meaningful impact, it does require taking some time to take a step back, reflect on what you've been doing, and also ask others as well.
And I suppose, just to add on to what I want to say, it's honestly just reiterating what's been said already, but I think it's very important that you need to realize the intentionality of why are we doing this? Why did you start this work in the first place? We'll meet challenges, we'll meet setbacks, and sometimes it'll be very difficult to accept that. So there'll be failures, but there's a reason that all of us, that you want to be involved in this work and involved in civic engagement, because it's bigger than just you individually. It's bigger. You're doing it for a larger reason. You really want to help people. You really want to make a difference. So taking that step back and really reflecting on why are you doing this will help you when you're dealing with those setbacks, those challenges, and then help you to do double effort, triple efforts, and really get the results that need to be made for America and just your community to be a better place in general.
Well, thank you guys. And on behalf of SCUC and the entire Civic Action Week, we'd like to thank the panelists for sharing your experiences and your knowledge and just taking the time to talk with us today. I know things that I learned and can take away from this panel are that civic engagement really does help you gain valuable skills, and those skills can be valuable in any sort of career or profession. So civic engagement doesn't just have to be those typical direct service experiences that we all think about. Another takeaway that I think everyone can agree is that passion is a huge driving force and should be a huge driving force in anything that you do. And to sort of keep that motivation and be civically engaged, always go back to that passion think about that passion and why you're doing what you're doing, and let that sort of drive you to complete things that are bigger than you and engage in things that may be bigger than you or things that you didn't think were possible. In addition, we'd also like to thank our supervisor, Shanae Jeffrey, for supporting us in putting together this event, and also for leading the Civic Action Week efforts. We would also like to thank you, our attendees, for taking the time to learn about how you can use the Civic Pathways to make an impact on your career. If you have any more questions, please feel free to email SCEC. You can email us at scec@pitt.edu. Be sure to check out the Pitt Serves website for information on more upcoming opportunities, because there will be more opportunities. It does not just end after Civic Action Week. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram. We're at @PittServes_SCEC. And with that, I'll let everyone go. Thank you guys so much and have a great weekend.